America was built on water, from the Atlantic fishing fleets that fed colonial settlements to the Mississippi riverboats that moved commerce through the heartland, from the Great Lakes freighters that carried iron ore to the pleasure craft that defined post-war prosperity. Boats have been woven into the fabric of American life. For generations, owning a boat meant freedom. Weekends on the lake, family fishing trips, sunset cruises that created memories worth more than the money they cost. But right now, in 2025, the American boat market is experiencing something unprecedented. It's not just slowing down, it's not just correcting, it's collapsing in ways that are reshaping an industry that employs hundreds of thousands of people and supports entire coastal economies. From January through April of 2025, only 64,883 new boats sold in the United States. That's down from 71,321 in the same period of 2024, a 9% decline that accelerates trends dealers have been watching with growing alarm for months. But the overall number doesn't tell the complete story. Pontoon boats, the family-friendly vessels that became pandemic favorites, saw sales crater by 19.5%. Jet boats dropped 19.9%. Wake sport boats fell 14.3%. These aren't minor corrections. These are segment collapses that have dealers slashing prices, manufacturers cutting production by 13%, and an entire industry wondering how things went so wrong so fast. Marinas overflow with boats nobody wants. Classified ads fill with desperate sellers offering deals that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. Dealers who weathered the 2008 recession wonder if they'll survive this one. Here's what most people missed. The warning signs were there, flashing red for anyone paying attention. But momentum and optimism kept the industry building boats for buyers who would never come. And that's where this story truly begins. To understand the current crisis, you need to understand what boats represent in American culture and economics. This isn't just about recreational toys or luxury purchases. This is about an industry that's been integral to American life for over a century. In the decades following World War II, as the American middle class expanded and prosperity spread beyond major cities, boat ownership became accessible to families who'd never considered it before. Veterans returned from naval service with knowledge of boats and water, bringing skills and comfort with maritime life into civilian communities. The interstate highway system, completed in the 1950s and 60s, connected inland families to lakes and coastal waters, making weekend boating trips practical for people who lived hours from shorelines. Boat manufacturers emerged across the country, concentrated in regions where fiberglass manufacturing, woodworking traditions, and access to testing waters converged. Florida became the center of saltwater fishing boat production, with companies building center consoles and offshore boats designed for the unique demands of Atlantic and Gulf fishing. Minnesota and Wisconsin developed reputations for freshwater fishing boats and pontoons, vessels designed for the 10,000 lakes and countless rivers that define the upper Midwest. Michigan specialized in larger cruisers and cabin boats, leveraging automotive industry expertise in manufacturing and the proximity to Great Lakes testing grounds. These weren't faceless corporations. Many were family businesses started by boat enthusiasts who turned hobbies into careers, building boats in garages and small shops before expanding into proper manufacturing facilities. The workers who built these boats developed specialized skills passed down through generations. A fiberglass laminator learned to lay cloth and resin to exact specifications, creating hulls that were strong yet light, durable yet repairable. Gel coat technicians mastered the art of achieving flawless finishes in colors that would withstand years of sun and saltwater exposure. Carpenters built custom interiors, fitting cabinetry and furniture into spaces with compound curves and irregular dimensions. Electricians wired complex systems, navigation lights, bilge pumps, live wells, stereos, GPS units, into boats where every wire had to be marine grade and every connection had to resist corrosion. These jobs paid middle-class wages, supported families, bought houses, sent kids to college. The pride in craftsmanship ran deep. Workers who could point to boats on local lakes and say, "I built that," felt connections to their work that transcended mere employment. The communities where boats were built developed identities around their products. High school students in these towns grew up knowing they could graduate and find good-paying work at the boat plant. Summer meant overtime shifts as manufacturers built inventory for the crucial spring and summer selling seasons. when dealers moved the majority of annual sales. Local economies depended on boat manufacturing. Restaurants fed workers during lunch breaks. Bars hosted after-shift gatherings. Retail stores sold goods purchased with boat-building wages. Tax revenues from manufacturers funded schools and infrastructure. When boat sales slumped, entire towns felt the impact as layoffs rippled through communities and spending contracted. The dealers who sold these boats operated on models different from automotive dealerships. Boat dealers were often family operations, second or third generation businesses, where the owner had grown up around boats, had learned the business from a father or uncle who'd opened the dealership decades earlier. These weren't high-pressure sales environments, focused on moving metal and hitting monthly quotas. Boat dealers built relationships that lasted years or decades. A good dealer knew his customers personally, understood their families, their skill levels, their budgets, the bodies of water where they'd operate boats. He recommended models suited to specific uses, advised on features and options, provided honest assessments of what customers needed versus what they wanted. This relationship extended beyond the initial sale. Boat owners returned for service, for winterization, for upgrades and accessories. They sought advice when problems arose, when they considered moving up to larger boats, when they wanted to try different types of boating. The dealer became a resource, a trusted advisor whose reputation depended on steering customers right rather than maximizing profit on individual transactions. This model worked when the industry moved at reasonable pace, when customers stayed loyal for decades, when referrals and reputation mattered more than advertising and promotions. The dealerships themselves reflected this approach. Many occupied the same locations for decades, buildings that showed age but conveyed stability and permanence. The showrooms displayed boats alongside photos of local waters, families enjoying boats the dealership had sold, tournaments won by anglers, fishing from boats purchased there. The parts departments stocked items specific to local conditions, sunscreen and fishing tackle in coastal locations, ski ropes and wakeboards in lake communities, winterization supplies in northern climates. The service bays employed mechanics who knew specific models intimately, who could diagnose problems over the phone and order parts before customers arrived. The marinas where boats lived when not in use became communities in their own right. Slip neighbors helped each other with maintenance, sharing tools and expertise accumulated over years of boat ownership. They watched each other's boats, called if they noticed problems, lent dock lines and fenders when needed. Children who grew up in marina communities learned to swim off boat transoms, learned knot tying and basic seamanship from parents and dock neighbors, absorbed water safety and boat handling through observation and instruction that happened organically. The marina office became a gathering place where boaters checked weather forecasts, paid slip fees, caught up on community news, and planned group cruises or fishing trips. Summer weekends brought impromptu gatherings, grills fired up on finger piers, coolers shared among neighbors, conversations that stretched into evenings as boats rocked gently in their slips. This was the ecosystem supporting American boating. Manufacturers building boats with pride and craftsmanship, dealers selling them with knowledge and integrity, marinas housing them in communities that formed around shared passion for water, and owners living a lifestyle that justified the expense and effort boat ownership required. The economics were never favorable on paper. Boats depreciated from the moment of purchase, required expensive insurance, demanded slip fees that could run $3,000 to $5,000 annually in popular locations, needed winterization in northern climates that added another $1,000 each fall, and consumed fuel at rates that made road vehicles look economical. The old joke captured the reality. The two happiest days of boat ownership are the day you buy it and the day you sell it. But the dream was powerful enough to overcome rational financial analysis. Owning a boat meant escape from shore-bound routine, meant teaching children skills and creating memories that would last their lifetimes, meant sunsets viewed from water and fish caught with family and freedom, measured in nautical miles rather than commute times. For many American families, particularly those in regions where boating was woven into local culture, the boat wasn't just recreation, it was where relationships deepened, where generations connected, where the pace of life slowed enough to actually appreciate what mattered. Then came 2020, and the pandemic changed everything in ways nobody anticipated. COVID-19 shut down restaurants, movie theaters, theme parks, concerts. professional sports, virtually every form of public entertainment Americans had taken for granted. Families stuck at home, burning through savings they couldn't spend on vacations or dining out, started looking for activities that didn't involve crowds or enclosed spaces. Boats became the perfect pandemic purchase. You could socially distance on water, you could escape lockdowns legally, you could give families experiences when everything else was canceled. First-time buyers who'd never seriously considered boat ownership suddenly wanted in, convinced by social media posts, from friends showing idyllic afternoons on the water. Dealers reported phenomena they'd never experienced. Lines of customers waiting when dealerships opened, bidding wars over available inventory, deposits placed on boats that wouldn't arrive for 6 or 8 months. People bought boats sight unseen, trusting dealer descriptions and photos, because actually viewing boats meant competing with dozens of other buyers. The urgency was palpable and unprecedented. Buyers feared missing out, feared that boats would become unavailable, feared that prices would climb beyond reach if they hesitated. The industry responded by ramping up production. Manufacturers added shifts, hired workers, ordered materials in bulk, anticipating sustained demand. Factory floors that had operated single shifts for years went to 2 or 3 shifts, running nearly around the clock to meet orders that kept coming. Suppliers of engines, electronics, upholstery, and components struggled to keep pace, creating bottlenecks that delayed production and frustrated dealers who had customers waiting. The optimism was infectious. Executives projected continued growth, convinced that pandemic buying represented a permanent expansion of the boating market, rather than an artificial surge driven by temporary circumstances. Investment analysts covering the marine industry raised projections and recommended boat manufacturer stocks. Trade publications ran articles celebrating boating's bright future and discussing how the industry would manage sustained growth. 2021 became a record year. Over 300,000 new boats sold nationwide, numbers that shattered previous records and seemed to validate the industry's optimism. Dealers sold through inventory as fast as it arrived, often pre-selling boats before they reached showrooms. Manufacturers announced facility expansions, new model introductions, and production increases. Workers received bonuses and profit-sharing payments as companies achieved record revenues. The mood was celebratory. Finally, after years of modest growth and the devastating 2008 recession, the boat industry was booming. Nobody wanted to hear warnings that pandemic buying was artificial, that first-time buyers might discover boats weren't for them, that economic conditions favorable to boat buying might not persist. The momentum felt unstoppable. The growth trajectory appeared sustainable. The future looked bright. But beneath the celebration, problems were building that would eventually topple the entire structure. The Federal Reserve, responding to inflation, driven partly by pandemic spending, supply chain disruptions, and energy cost increases, began raising interest rates in 2022. For boat buyers financing purchases, this meant dramatic cost increases. A $50,000 boat, financed at 3% interest over 10 years, required monthly payments of roughly $483. That same boat at 7% interest demanded roughly $580 monthly, a nearly $100 increase that represented $1,200 annually. For buyers on fixed incomes or tight budgets, that difference killed deals that would have closed at lower rates. The impact on total loan costs was even more dramatic. Over 10 years, the lower rate cost roughly $58,000 total, while the higher rate approached $69,000, an $11,000 difference in interest alone. The initial rate increases didn't immediately slow sales, because inventory remained tight from pandemic demand, and buyers still felt urgency. But by late 2022, dealers started noticing changes that signaled fundamental market shifts. Showroom traffic declined from the frantic levels of 2020 and 21. Saturday mornings that had brought crowds now saw modest foot traffic. The phone calls from interested buyers became less frequent, and the calls that did come involved more price negotiation and less urgency. Customers who'd placed deposits during the boom started canceling orders, citing changed financial circumstances, or simply deciding they no longer wanted boats they'd ordered months earlier. Boats that would have sold in days during the pandemic sat on lots for weeks, then months. Dealers found themselves competing on price and terms rather than simply managing allocation of scarce inventory. The seller's market that had characterized the pandemic years was ending, replaced by conditions that favored buyers who could afford to wait and negotiate. Meanwhile, manufacturers continued building boats based on projections from the boom years, flooding dealers with inventory. Those dealers increasingly struggled to sell at profitable prices. The production pipelines were long. Boats ordered by dealers in early 2022 didn't arrive until late 2022 or into 2023, by which time market conditions had changed completely. Dealers who'd ordered aggressively during the boom, confident they'd sell everything they could get, found themselves drowning in inventory as demand cooled and interest rates climbed. The inventory glut developed gradually, then accelerated into a crisis. Dealers who'd ordered boats during the boom received deliveries in 2023 and 2024, long after the market had shifted. The boats arriving weren't necessarily the boats customers wanted anymore. Mid-range powerboats and pontoon boats that had been hot sellers during the pandemic lost appeal as buyers either couldn't afford them or chose to wait for better deals. The feature packages dealers had ordered during the boom, when customers wanted every upgrade and option, now sat unsold because budget-conscious buyers wanted basic models at lower prices. The lot space that had seemed barely adequate during the boom became cramped with unsold inventory. Dealers rented additional storage, parked boats in overflow lots, even left boats wrapped at manufacturers' facilities. Rather than accepting delivery and paying floor plan interest on inventory, they couldn't move. The used boat market complicated the new boat crisis in ways that compounded dealer problems. Pandemic buyers who'd purchased boats on impulse discovered that boat ownership meant far more than sunny afternoons on water. It meant maintenance schedules, winterization procedures, slip fees, insurance premiums, fuel costs that added up shockingly fast when you calculated cost per hour of actual use. The romantic vision of weekend escapes collided with reality. Boats required work before and after each use. Mechanical issues arose requiring expensive repairs, weather-limited usable days, and life's other obligations often took priority. Some buyers discovered they simply didn't enjoy boating enough to justify the expense and effort. The boat sat unused in the marina or driveway, accumulating costs while generating guilt. Others faced financial pressures as inflation eroded purchasing power and pandemic savings depleted. The extra money that had seemed abundant in 2020 and 21 disappeared as grocery bills doubled, energy costs spiked, and general living expenses consumed income that had previously covered boat payments and slip fees. These owners started selling, creating a flood of used inventory that saturated the market. The desperation showed in classified advertisements promising must sell, priced to move, motivated seller, and make offer, phrases signaling owners willing to accept losses just to escape ongoing costs. Private sellers who'd paid $60,000 for pontoon boats in 2021 found themselves accepting $40,000 or $45,000 offers in 2024 and 25, taking substantial losses to get out from under depreciating assets and ongoing expenses. The volume of used boats overwhelmed traditional sales channels, classified sites, Facebook marketplace groups, marina bulletin boards, all filled with listings. Brokers who specialized in used boats reported inventory levels they'd never experienced, with boats sitting unsold for 6 months or longer despite aggressive pricing. The falling used boat prices devastated new boat sales by creating price gaps dealers couldn't overcome. Why pay $70,000 for a new pontoon boat when a 3-year-old model with minimal hours sold for $45,000? The $25,000 difference represented real money that rational buyers couldn't ignore. Dealers tried to compete by offering incentives, free upgrades, extended warranties, reduced delivery fees, included accessories. But 30% price advantages made used boats irresistible to budget-conscious buyers, particularly when those used boats were recent models in good condition. The financing advantage dealers could offer through manufacturer programs helped some, but even 0% financing couldn't overcome price differences, measuring in tens of thousands of dollars. Dealers found themselves competing not just with other dealers, but with thousands of private sellers, whose only goal was escaping boat ownership. Sellers willing to accept any reasonable offer, rather than continue paying expenses on boats they no longer wanted. By early 2025, the slowdown had become a full-scale collapse that threatened the industry's survival. The January through April sales figures, 64,883 new boats sold nationwide, represented not just a decline, but an accelerating crisis that had dealers desperate and manufacturers cutting production. The 9% overall decline masked segment-specific disasters. Pontoon boats, which had been pandemic stars due to their versatility and family-friendly layouts, saw sales plummet 19.5%. These boats, priced typically between $40,000 and $70,000, hit the sweet spot of middle-class affordability during the boom. But that same price point became a vulnerability as interest rates climbed and buyers balked at monthly payments, approaching $600 or $700 for boats that would depreciate rapidly. Jet boats dropped 19.9%, victims of their specialized nature and higher operating costs. Wake sport boats fell 14.3% as the young buyers who'd driven their popularity faced financial pressures, and aging buyers moved toward less demanding boats. Interestingly, fishing boats and yachts remained relatively stable, down less than 1%. This stability reflected different buyer demographics: serious anglers who needed boats for their sport, and wealthy yacht buyers insulated from interest rate and inflation concerns. But these stable segments couldn't offset the catastrophic declines in volume segments that generated the majority of industry sales and dealer profits. The wholesale shipment decline of 13% showed manufacturers finally cutting production in response to inventory gluts. But even that reduction wasn't enough. Dealers reported inventory levels that would take 2 or 3 years to clear at current sales rates, inventory financed through floor plan arrangements that accumulated interest charges, eating into profits or creating losses on every boat sold. The dealer desperation became visible in advertising and promotions that would have been unthinkable during the boom. Prices slashed 20, 30, even 40% off manufacturer. Suggested retail prices appeared in advertisements and dealer websites. Extended financing terms stretched payments over 15 or 20 years, trying to make monthly costs manageable despite higher interest rates. 0% financing promotions, subsidized by manufacturers trying to move inventory or by dealers accepting reduced profits, became common despite the broader high-rate environment. Free upgrades, better engines, premium upholstery, advanced electronics were thrown in to differentiate offers and create value perceptions. Some dealers offered to include trailers, covers, and first-year slip fees, adding thousands in value to overcome buyer hesitation. Trade-in offers became aggressive, with dealers offering inflated values for buyers' current boats to make new purchases pencil out, then absorbing losses on those trade-ins that had no ready market. The promotional language reflected the desperation: blowout sale, inventory reduction event, final clearance, dealer must reduce inventory, phrases that signaled distress rather than strength. The smallest dealers faced existential crises. Family operations that had sold boats for decades suddenly couldn't pay bills as floor plan interest on unsold inventory consumed cash flow while sales revenue dried up. Some dealers quietly closed, liquidating inventory at bankruptcy auction prices and walking away from businesses their families had operated for generations. Others sold to larger regional chains that had capital to survive downturns, ending independence but avoiding total loss. The consolidation accelerated trends that had been developing for years. The boat dealer landscape was shifting from family operations toward larger corporate entities with multiple locations and deeper financial resources. The human cost extended beyond dealers to manufacturers and workers. Production cuts meant layoffs across manufacturing facilities. Workers who'd been hired during the boom found themselves unemployed within months, victims of an industry that had overexpanded based on unsustainable demand. More painfully, longtime workers with decades of experience faced layoffs or reduced hours as companies cut production to match declining orders. The generational knowledge walking out of these factories represented losses beyond immediate unemployment. The fiberglass laminators who could achieve perfect hand layups, the gel coat technicians who knew how to match colors precisely, the carpenters who could build custom interiors to exacting standards. These skills developed over careers couldn't be preserved in manuals or training programs. When these workers left the industry, permanently or temporarily, their expertise departed with them. The communities where boats were manufactured felt impacts rippling through local economies. Restaurants near manufacturing plants saw lunch business decline as shifts were eliminated. Retail stores that depended on boat worker wages saw spending contract. Tax revenues from manufacturers declined as production fell. straining municipal budgets and forcing difficult decisions about services and employment. The high school students who'd assumed they'd work at boat plants after graduation faced uncertain futures, their career paths disrupted by an industry in crisis. The financing situation compounded every problem facing the industry. Interest rates that had stayed near zero for over a decade had climbed to levels that fundamentally changed boat buying economics in ways that destroyed affordability for buyers on budgets. The monthly payment differences pushed boats out of reach for many buyers who'd qualified during the boom. But the higher rates also increased default risk, making lenders more conservative about credit approvals. Banks and credit unions tightened lending standards, requiring larger down payments and stronger credit scores. Buyers who'd qualified easily during the boom found themselves declined or offered terms they couldn't accept. The manufacturers who'd offered generous financing through captive finance arms discovered default rates climbing as buyers who'd stretched to purchase boats during the boom couldn't maintain payments when other living costs increased. Repossessions increased steadily, adding more inventory to an already glutted used boat market. The boats coming back through repossession were often damaged or poorly maintained, worth less than outstanding loan balances, creating losses for lenders who then tightened standards further in self-reinforcing cycles. The depreciation that had always affected boats accelerated in ways that shocked owners and lenders. During the pandemic boom, used boats had held value remarkably well because new inventory was scarce. Some used boats even appreciated, selling for more than their owners had paid. This created false security among buyers who assumed boats would always hold reasonable value. The collapse destroyed that assumption brutally. Used boats flooded the market as owners, desperate to escape ongoing costs, accepted whatever offers they received. The supply-demand imbalance drove prices down 20, 30, 40% from pandemic-era peaks. Owners who'd purchased boats in 2021 for $60,000 or $70,000 found them worth $40,000 or $45,000 in 2025, leaving them owing more on loans than boats were worth. This underwater situation trapped owners who couldn't sell without writing checks for the difference between sale prices and loan balances, money they often didn't have. Some chose to keep boats they no longer wanted, rather than accept the financial hit of selling. Others defaulted on loans and let lenders repossess boats, damaging credit but escaping ongoing costs. The depreciation created price ceilings for new boats. Dealers couldn't sell new boats when similar used models sold for 40% less. Consumer confidence collapsed along with prices and sales. Potential buyers saw inventory rising and prices falling and made rational decisions to wait. Why purchase today when boats would be cheaper in 3 months? This waiting game became self-fulfilling prophecy. As buyers delayed, dealers grew more desperate and prices fell further, confirming buyers' decisions to wait. The psychology created downward spirals that traditional sales tactics couldn't break. Free upgrades didn't matter to buyers expecting even better deals next month. Extended financing helped monthly payments, but couldn't overcome fear of buying depreciating assets in falling markets. The social proof that had driven pandemic buying reversed completely. Instead of friends posting happy boating photos that inspired purchases, potential buyers heard horror stories about boats nobody wanted, about owners unable to sell, about depreciation that made purchases feel like throwing money away. The online forums and social media groups where boaters congregated filled with complaints and warnings. Threads about dealer desperation and falling prices scared away potential buyers who might have purchased without seeing the industry's struggles laid bare publicly. The transparency of online information meant nobody could be unaware of market conditions, and that awareness killed sales that might have closed in earlier eras when information traveled slower. The for sale by owner struggles became their own cautionary tales. Private sellers reported boats sitting unsold even at steep discounts, receiving lowball offers or no offers at all, watching as interested buyers disappeared after viewing boats. The stories circulated through boating communities, reinforcing perceptions that boats were bad investments, that ownership created problems, that the dream didn't match reality. This isn't the first time the American boat industry has crashed. The 2008 recession brought similar devastation, plunging sales, desperate dealers, manufacturer bankruptcies. Major brands disappeared or were absorbed by competitors during that crisis. The recovery took years, with production and sales requiring nearly a decade to rebuild to pre-recession levels. Some manufacturers never returned. Their brands discontinued or sold to competitors who built boats under legacy names, but with different designs and quality. The workers laid off during that crash often never came back to the industry, finding employment elsewhere or retiring early, taking their skills and experience permanently. But the current collapse feels different because it follows a boom rather than a broader economic recession. The overall economy, while challenged by inflation, hasn't collapsed the way it did in 2008. Employment remains relatively strong across most sectors. Consumer spending continues robustly in many categories. But boats have become uniquely vulnerable due to their discretionary nature and financing sensitivity. Nobody needs a boat. Boats are luxuries, toys, recreational purchases that become impossible to justify when interest rates make financing expensive and depreciation makes ownership a guaranteed money loser. The industry faces credibility problems it didn't have after 2008. Buyers who purchased during the pandemic boom feel burned by depreciation and ongoing costs that exceeded expectations. They became walking warnings against boat ownership, telling friends and family that boats aren't worth it, that expenses never end, that the dream doesn't match reality. This word-of-mouth damage will take years to overcome, even after market conditions improve. The trust between buyers and the industry has been damaged in ways that transcend economic cycles. The question facing the industry is what comes next, and whether American boat manufacturing can survive this collapse in a form recognizable to those who remember healthier times. Some manufacturers won't survive. Smaller brands without deep-pocketed parent companies or private equity backing will exhaust cash reserves and close. Their assets will be liquidated, their designs mothballed or sold, their workers scattered to other industries or retirement. The brands that defined childhoods and created memories will become footnotes in marine industry history. Dealer consolidation will accelerate as regional chains absorb failed family businesses, creating larger operations with better capitalization, but less personal connection to customers and communities. The dealers who survive will be those with diversified revenue streams, service departments, parts sales, used boat operations that can sustain businesses when new boat sales collapse. Marina operators will struggle with abandoned boats and vacant slips as owners unable to sell boats and unwilling to continue paying slip fees simply walk away from vessels. Derelict boats create liability and environmental problems that marinas must address, often at their own expense. Some marinas may convert boat storage to other uses if the boat market doesn't recover within reasonable timeframes. The industry that emerges will likely be smaller, more concentrated, more cautious about production expansions that create inventory gluts. The boats being built may look different too. Smaller, more affordable models, designed for buyers priced out of larger boats during the boom. Electric propulsion may gain market share as manufacturers seek differentiation and respond to environmental regulations, though battery technology and charging infrastructure remain barriers to widespread adoption. Used boats may dominate sales for years as inventory works through the system and buyers opt for value over new boat features and warranties. But there are possibilities worth considering beyond decline and consolidation. Some industry observers believe the shakeout will ultimately strengthen surviving manufacturers by eliminating weak competitors and forcing realistic production levels that match actual sustainable demand rather than boom year projections. The buyers sitting on the sidelines may eventually return when convinced that prices have bottomed and inventory has normalized, that the risk of further depreciation has diminished. New boat designs optimized for affordability and low operating costs could attract younger buyers who've been priced out of traditional boats, bringing fresh demographics into boating and creating growth in segments that don't currently exist. Electric boats, while currently expensive and range-limited, may improve enough to offer compelling alternatives with lower operating costs and reduced environmental impacts that appeal to environmentally conscious buyers. The used boat market, once it absorbs current inventory and stabilizes, may actually help the industry by making boat ownership accessible to buyers who can't afford new boats but want the lifestyle, creating pathways toward eventual new boat purchases as these buyers